Welcome back to the Sully Scoop, where three lifelong Husker bros dive in depth on all surrounding the new era of Husker football, where our cups never run dry of the Rule-Aid under head coach Matt Rule. Made by fans for fans with TSul, BSul, and TSul. We're back here on the Sully Scoop, and joining the Sullys this week, we got Justin from the Big Ten Show. Welcome in here, Justin.
Hey, how's it going, fellas? Appreciate y'all letting me join on and join the conversation before the show. I see we're all excited for football season.
Yeah, welcome
Absolutely.
on, Justin.
Yep, welcome on. And just a shout out, me and TSul have both joined onto Justin's show previously, and we were already there. Justin, where can we catch your show, or where can the listeners catch your show at?
Yeah, so Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football on YouTube, and we are also just now on Spotify and Amazon as well. So coming to Apple soon. So Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football.
Awesome. So we are about to get his predictions for the season and see what he's got going. We know some of us are shooting for the stars like BSul, and a lot of others are more realistic like myself, coming after the previous years of what we have seen from the Huskers. But let's just kick it off here with game one. We're pretty close, so almost week away. You know, it's week 0 right now, but the Huskers finally, not playing in Ireland this year. We got UTEP coming to town.
Am I starting off here?
Yeah, wherever you see going. What do you think about this game?
All right, UTEP. So, Scotty Walden is a first-year head coach there, and I think he's a great head coach. But UTEP's in a transition year, right? So naturally, it's going to be tough for them. I think RJ Young, he came out with his power rankings. I think they were like 122nd in that, and so it's not saying they're not going to be good. He came over from Austin P and brought some players over from there. And they hung in a game with I believe it was Tennessee last year. I can't remember. But so he's a talented coach, got some talented players, but again, he's in a transition year. So this should be pretty easy work for Nebraska in week 1. So yeah, I don't know about the 27.5-point spread. I try to avoid spreads that big, especially for backdoor covers. But yeah, Nebraska takes this one.
Yeah, no doubts about it. Nebraska's gonna whoop on UTEP. I mean, you bring all the knowledge of UTEP. I don't even need the knowledge. I just see those guys. They're coming to Memorial. They're done. Gone. Next.
Yep. Well, I do want to say I did play the spread. You lock it in with TSul here. You take the spread. We're covering the points.
All right. I like it.
As BSul would say, steamrolling.
Yeah, I think it's, like Justin said, it's a transition year for sure, but I would like to think that Nebraska is going to come out here. This is the first time in TSul. What did we talk? It was the first time in 6 years we're not opening against a Power 5 team. So I would like to think that it's a get right game for the Huskers, but it's also one that they should be able to take care of business and hopefully, get some kinks out and really shore up the quarterback battle if they're still undecided going into week 1. I don't think they are, but if they're undecided, I hope this game helps them decide before Colorado comes to town.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable to talk about opening up against a non-Power 5 and looking at this as like a game changer of what we've done in the past, 6 years. You look at teams like Michigan, they're going against, non-Power 5 teams. You look at like most SEC schools, they're doing that too. It helps you get right for the season. Opening up against a Power 5 school, anything can happen. These guys are all high talented caliber players. So I think this has a great potential to start off with a 1-0 on the schedule for the Huskers. Finally be undefeated in a season, and we could just keep that rolling. But we got to take one game at a time, and before we get ahead of ourselves, just gotta get past UTEP here.
And Justin, I got a question for you. A couple weeks ago, me and BSul, we went back and forth on this about this week 1 matchup. What is your point spread and where you are in the game if you decide you're going to pull Raiola? And do you pull him at all, period?
Yeah. So what you mean point spread? What I think the Nebraska would win by margin wise?
Well,
no,
like I'm saying, like
how much
if you're
do they have to be up by?
2 touchdowns at half, do you pull them? Kind of thing.
So here's my thing on it, right? Because I put some thought into this because Matt Rule is again of the belief you get better at playing football by playing football, right? And so it's a matter of how long does he want to mind that gap of knowing he needs to get valuable playing time before week 2, but still not risking injury. I think it's a third quarter type of deal. I think if Nebraska's up maybe like 3 scores going into the fourth quarter, I think they pull them between the third and the fourth. So I think it would be more of a third quarter type of thing as opposed to a halftime. But yeah, I would say if they're up by about 3 scores, anything less than that, he's probably staying in.
Yeah, my take on it, and I think that is realistic. I think if they pull him at all, it'd be in between that transition from the third to the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
For me, I liked like the idea of like not pulling him because this team has shown that they blow every lead in the last few years. So I think you keep your foot to the metal and just keep blowing them out. You know?
It depends on, I think it depends on games too, right? Like, what is the momentum like in that transition from the third to the fourth quarter? You know, is it like, or is UTEP making a push, right? Like, are they about to score? It's a 3-score game, you know, and they're at the 20-yard line. They're in the red zone, right?
Right.
I think that's going to matter too, to your point. Yeah. So like the kind of the momentum and just how things are going, I think it's going to be just kind of a situational type of decision. But I would not be surprised if he left him in there for the entirety of the game. You know, I wouldn't be surprised at all, just because he does want him to get those reps and does want him to get that experience. But I think that's why it has to be at least 3 scores before he'll pull him. But yeah, there is that possibility there that if UTEP's maybe making a run or a push, you know, and trying to get some momentum back, that they leave him in just in case they score and need to come out, and, you know, the offense needs to put a drive together, because the last thing you wanted them to double dip, you know, come out and be ready to score in the fourth, immediately score in the fourth, and then you stall out with your second team offense because it's their first drive on the field, you know, that type of situation. And then they got all the momentum in a 2-score game. So
yeah, I think that's a good point too. The other side that I look at is, I think also with game script, is how has the offensive line held up against UTEP? Because the other side, it's going to be a long season. We already are down Teddy now at this point. So how's Turner adjusted after taking all those reps at right guard to now left tackle? And how is everybody else adjusting to their new position? If you're up, like you said, that 3 scores, even if UTEP's driving, but Dylan's just been hit constantly, which I don't expect to happen. But if he's just taking a beating, I think you also look at that thinking, you know, while I want him to get the experience, I also need you to be healthy for the other 11 games.
yeah, exactly.
Why you say you don't expect that to happen? Have you not watched our offensive line in the past few years, TSul? Have you not watched the offensive line last year? This is one of the worst offensive lines in college football in the Big Ten, and it is the reason that the Huskers have been losing games. The games are won and lost in the trenches, and our defensive line has been there to stand up and, you know, knock down the other team and keep us in games. The only game they didn't really keep us in was Michigan, which, you know, it's pretty hard to beat somebody when they know your plays. However, this offensive line really has to show up and show something. And there is no depth to this offensive line either. We have one center. We already lost the left tackle before the season starts. I mean, this is really going to be a dicey thing to where, is he going to be hit? You're darn right he's going to be hit.
Bill, if you want to respond to that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, my whole thought is I'm not saying he's not going to get hit. I'm not oblivious to the offensive line play we've had for the past, 6-7 years. I think this offensive line, with pretty much the entire line, I think, aside from left guard, is returning from last year. Even with Turner going back to left tackle, he played a lot of left tackle without Teddy there last season. And having a quarterback who probably to some degree is better at counting down the seconds in his head when he has to let go of the ball, as opposed to we had a lot of run first guys last year that were not necessarily counting down on when they had to get rid of the ball. It was more, okay, not open, not open, not open. And then they try to take off running. And so I would like to think Rayola is going to be better at, the 5 seconds, get rid of the ball. If it's not there, dump it off, live to see another play.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I was going to say the offensive line drastically did improve year over year from the previous year. So Raiola has shown that he can improve it. Now, I know it wasn't the best, it was an improvement from a really bad offensive line to kind of a, bad / okay offensive line. But, you think about, they went out in the portal and they got Micah Mazuka coming over from, he's played at Baylor, he's played in the SEC of Florida. So, and he has the potential to be one of our highest graded, he would have graded as our highest graded lineman last year. And you got Justin Evans, who formerly Justin Evans Jenkins, who was our highest graded, I believe it was, pass blocker on the team. And so he was a redshirt freshman last year. So he's going into sophomore season. Then you have the one, Ben Scott, who's going to be amazing at center. He's just fantastic, the top centers of the country. But then the one spot is just that left side, but kind of like TSul was saying, like, it's one of those things where it's like, when you have a quarterback in the pocket, it makes your offensive line's job that much easier because, they don't have eyes in the back of their head. So, they don't necessarily know tendencies when you're having 3 different quarterbacks playing. They don't know the tendencies of when you're scrambling, so they're kind of like head on a swivel at all times, trying to make sure you're protected, but trying to stay within the confines of the offensive schematics at the same time. So I think a lot of things are indicating that this year's offensive line will be pretty significantly improved over last year. And I do think a lot of that has, Raiola is going to play a lot into that success because of his style.
And that should happen with our expectations. I mean, we're going through your picks today, but I know my picks. I have Nebraska going 9-3.
Yeah.
The way that they go 9-3, you have better offensive play, which leads us to week 2, Colorado night game, the game where the tickets are ridiculous if you're looking at them. What do you have coming out in that one, Justin?
Yeah, so I think Nebraska wins that one by, I would say probably 10 points. That's the range I want to give us. I think we opened as a 6.5-point favorite. The one thing to say about Colorado, they have athletes, right? And so our defensive backs are going to need to be ready and step up and play in that game because they're going to be doing a lot of running and they can't miss assignments. The defense has to be on because they do have some athletes on that team. However, they're not very deep in terms of their roster. I think at one point in this offseason, when Nebraska had 120 or 117 scholarship players, Colorado had 72 of the max 85. So they were under on scholarships. They had over 40 players transfer out, over 40 transfer in. Some of that may have been an improvement in talent, but let's be honest, an offensive line, a defensive line, an offensive line more than any plays as a unit. So if you're trying to get a bunch of patchworked offensive linemen in there, and try to have them be a unit, through half of an off season, it's just not going to work. They need time in the trenches together to grow. And that's why Nebraska's experience, I think, is going to help them because Colorado don't have that experience. So I think it's just another thing where they don't have the depth. Nebraska needs to just get out, early and establish their game plan and they want to be able to establish the run game and kind of wear them down and really tire them out and just kind of use that to set up the deep pass game and kind of assert their dominance there. I don't think Colorado just has the physicality to hang with Nebraska for 4 quarters. So yeah, I'm thinking Nebraska is going to win that by about 10. And I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm feeling much better about that game this year than I did last year.
Yeah.
Do you
Totally
think
agree with
most of that comes from just being at home then? You think just the team overall has just drastically improved from last year?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I think Nebraska's team has improved more than Colorado's over the course of the offseason. And last year, for all intents and purposes, Nebraska really, as we know, shot themselves in the foot in that game. But, stepping out over to this year, we don't even know what Colorado's going to have this year because there's been so many players that have turned over on that roster. So it's like they're a big question mark, and Nebraska's kind of gaining some momentum, and we're starting to see some actual development of players, but Colorado remains this big question mark of a roster. It's like what to expect, So yeah, I think it's a combination.
I agree with you. And I also believe last year, if we would have played Colorado at the end of the season or the middle of the season, we would have beat them or at least played a closer game than what it turned into. Because we thought Jeff Sims was going to be this all-world quarterback at this point still. We didn't know our defense was who they were. So there were a lot of question marks. And to your point, coming in to this year with Colorado, they don't have the physicality to keep up with us. They got athletes, but ultimately I think for Colorado, an ideal situation for them would be if they just come out of this Nebraska game with no injuries, because the way they treated our team last year, those big boys, Nash and Ty Robinson and company, are going to be looking to take those guys out. It every single play. They're Rule's gonna be like, you need to come out, or Tony White's gonna be like, come out for a play, you got to rest, and be like, hell no, you got to hit that guy.
Yep,
that's what I think.
Exactly. No, I agree.
Absolutely. But I do want to say, I like that we're playing Colorado a much, they have a lot of athletes and everything. I think it's going to prepare the Huskers because there's not another team we're going to be playing this season until Ohio State. So I think playing some athletes with this type of speed could potentially rev up the defense and show us what we could potentially look like against an Ohio State style offense. But that's getting ahead of myself and getting ahead of TSul right there. The next game we got coming is University of Northern Iowa coming to town, a spot that Scott Frost liked to go recruit at.
Northern Iowa. Let's see. This is going to be a barn burner. Do I even have to break this one down?
Nope.
Northern Iowa, Nebraska by 1 million. That's just sorry about my dogs, but Nebraska by 1 million. If you want to talk with my dog,
all good, man. Yeah, as in the words of TSul, steamroll. Next game.
Steamroll. It's over.
I was gonna say, I don't think this game's gonna be close. I think it's gonna be nice to have the Huskers open in 3-0. I think everybody across the board expects that to happen. Yeah. And even last year, like we were talking, coming off a heartbreaker against Minnesota, then against Colorado, we were really in it until halfway through the third quarter after giving them twice as many possessions. So it's just
a game until it was a 2-score game until like 7 minutes in the fourth quarter, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I was trying to think when they doubled up the points, but
yeah.
But no, to me, I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Huskers to really get some momentum before Big Ten play. And again, I think the schedule really lines up pretty favorably here for us in the first year without divisions, which sucks.
Yeah, true. We still got to play Wisconsin though, who always
and
avoid
that.
They have been the toughest. Yeah. And that's what, after this Northern Iowa game, it brings us into Big Ten play. I think this is going to be a tough showing for the Huskers. I mean, 3-0, we haven't seen that in how many years now? And it's going to be the fourth game at home, which definitely helps. But we got a short week, and this is going to be the best defensive front seven that we're going to be seeing at this point in the season, and the best offensive line at this point with a running back. And I think Illinois is one of those teams, if they get a lead, they're just going to hold on to the ball and run the clock. It's Big Ten play in this game.
Yeah, Illinois is one of the 2 most physical teams that we play in that first 6-game stretch. I'll tell you the other when we get there, but y'all might probably already know that. But it's going to be this one's going to be interesting for me, because the games that we're really going to get to see what Raiola is made of are the games where the teams potentially can get physical with him and wear on him. How does he respond once his body takes a little bit of a beating, when he's feeling sore, when he has to stand in the pocket in college and take hits, because we see it all over his high school film where he's standing there tall in the pocket and can deliver a deep ball, while he's taking a hit. So I think this would be a great test, because I don't think Illinois is more talented than Nebraska by any stretch. I don't think anybody is going to argue that, but they are very physical. So it'll give, similar to a Colorado, like for instance, Colorado will give Raiola experience of a primetime game in a big, huge, like Ohio State level atmosphere against the team that we're favored against. Right. So that to me is a blessing in disguise right there, that he's getting that against a non-Ohio State like team. And then in this game, he's getting a chance to go out there and, play a very physical team, but not a physical team that's also significantly better than Nebraska. So, he'll probably take some lumps, but he gets the chance to kind of battle through that, see how his body feels over the course of that week, and see how he kind of transitions, because at a certain point he's going to start to feel it. And, we're going to want to see how he operates whenever, it's adversity hits. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I think Nebraska should have a pretty good, I would say probably a double-digit score here, or double-digit win here. I would say 14 or so, because for what Illinois is physicality-wise and what Bielema has built there, I just don't think they have the talent and the the athletes to hang with Nebraska, and I just think Nebraska's physicality will wear on them more than the opposite.
Yeah,
and
totally
I think
agree. And let's also remember too, last year Nebraska theoretically is a worse team than what they're coming in this year, and we beat those guys last year pretty easily on the road on a Friday game. So it's a Friday game again, except this time we're at home. It should be another dub.
Yeah, ugly game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it was, and that's that's the part here that I think this is when we'll figure out what this offensive line really is. I think you'll see glimpses of it against Colorado, but I think our front five, I think those guys match up pretty well. And like we talked, Colorado's transferred in so many guys that front seven that they have on defense is not consistent. They're not playing as a unit. This Illinois team is going to be physical. I think that's where it's going to come down to us seeing what they're made of. And like you said, seeing how Raiola hangs in the pocket. I expect Jalen Lloyd and Jamal Banks both to have a deep score here.
Yeah, the only thing I could see in this game is some freshman mistakes happen, especially against the first, Big Ten foe that he'll be seeing. And this is definitely a physical team that, Illinois is one of those teams. Brett Bielema is one of those coaches. If he gets a lead at any point in the game, good luck getting the ball back because he's just going to try to hold on to it. He doesn't care what the score looks like. A win is a win in his book. And, that's Big Ten play. So it's going to be the first true test.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chief. TSul is the only one here on this panel who has picked Illinois as a loss.
I was 9-3 last year, just so you know. I was 9-3 on my picks for the Huskers preseason. So I'm not saying that to be hyping myself up because I don't really want my picks to come to fruition, but that is what I have going. I think there's a lot of things that I cannot just get on Raiola and say that he's going to be our dark horse that's going to get us there. I did that with Jeff Sims. It really hurt me.
Wow. We had stats on Jeff Sims to be like, this is not a good idea. And we were supposed to have Casey Thompson. People forget we were supposed to have Casey Thompson too last year.
And now he's at Oklahoma. What is happening?
Yeah.
And watch him go off for Oklahoma and put him in the playoff and everything. I mean, I thought Casey Thompson was a pretty good quarterback. And even when he played at Nebraska, he was pretty good. I think yeah. Oh, absolutely. Obviously that helped him out, but I think he also had a terrible offensive line. So that's why he got hit against Illinois. And I believe he got injured against Illinois, which really hurt us as the Huskers and not reaching, 6 games. That's what the goal right now for the Huskers is just got to be 6 games. And let's hope that that's Saturday on September 28th against Purdue at Purdue. First road game turns out for us.
Ryan Walters, not a fan of Ryan Walters. However, he is recruiting well over at Purdue. But screw Ryan Walters, man. Nebraska beat Purdue last year. I think Purdue gets a little bit better this year, but I still think Nebraska wins that one pretty handedly. I think that was a much easier game than the Illinois game the week prior, and I do think it's a nice little break from coming off of that really physical week, and hopefully not a loss, TSul. So like that way they can extend the win streak, and yeah. But I think Ryan Walters, will have that team fired up. He's a player's coach, but he's got a good recruiting class, but that team is so far from where it needs to be that I just don't think Purdue has much for Nebraska this year.
Couldn't agree more. It's kind of ironic that you said that because TSul did have the Huskers losing this road game to Purdue as well. So at this point in the season, he's got them 3-2. And it leads me to this next question because when we first got back into the preseason this year, I made a claim. They all seem to think it's pretty bold at this point. I think Purdue is going to have the least amount of wins in the Big Ten this year.
Very possible.
I know you do. I was going to say, I know you do the Big Ten shows. Do you think Purdue is the worst team, or if not, who do you see as the worst team in the Big Ten?
I did have Purdue as my second to last team in my Big Ten power rankings earlier this offseason. Indiana was last, but I'm starting to come around a little bit more on Indiana. So at this point, at a quick glance, I'd probably off the top of my head say I would probably have Purdue at the bottom and Indiana a little bit higher now.
But we're talking like it's a Big Ten. This is a Big Ten West foe, and we've all seen everyone try to take the Big Ten West in the previous
years. Big Ten West, buddy.
Not anymore, but nobody could ever win the Big Ten West like the previous years. It was down to the wire at the end of the season. But this is really, I think, after coming off of what I predicted as a loss after a short week, first Big Ten team, I think going on the road, first road game, I think we could see a lot of tough stuff. And I think that their running back, TSul, what's his name? Your guy for Purdue, who's going to score 15 touchdowns.
Devin McAfee.
Yeah, Devin McAfee. I think he could have a game. But also, I just think that Purdue is going to be another one of those physical teams. And I think in Big Ten play, anything can really happen.
I guess.
Now, Justin, this is a little side thing here. But what do you think about Minnesota?
All right. Minnesota's a weird team to me. First off, Minnesota fans, I never have seen a fan base that is more obsessed with Nebraska and that are a fan of a team that I don't think anything about. Like, I never think about Minnesota. I'm not like, I'm going to get on Twitter today and I'm going to type something about Minnesota ever. So, like, first off, that's how I feel about Minnesota fans right now. This was new to me. I just got on Twitter last year, so this is new to me. But Minnesota, like, I think PJ Fleck is, of course, a corny, like, weirdo, you know, wears his pants too tight. But I just think Minnesota is probably like a middle of the pack Big Ten. I know Fleck's in what, year like 7 now, something like that. I think he's in year like 7. And they've been good the majority of the seasons, but for some reason, like, there's nothing about this team. And you know, Ethan Kaliak-Manis is gone. He's over at Rutgers. So they did get, you know, a transfer QB in from the FCS level, I believe. And, you know, he's a very good quarterback. But so we'll see how that turns out to be. But I have Minnesota about middle of the pack, man. I think Minnesota's good for about 6-7 wins, maybe.
I personally picked them as lower of the pack, possibly even the worst Big Ten team. I just think the years you were talking about when they had good seasons, they benefited from all that COVID year crap where Tanner Morgan, or whatever the heck that guy's name was, stayed there forever. And Ibrahim, that running back that beat Ohio State. Yeah. They've been on a downtrend ever since. And I mean, I run through Minnesota's schedule. I could see them losing more games than winning.
That's another thing. I've taken a peek at their schedule. I think their roster would be good for, like, on an average schedule, you know, 6 wins, but I actually have to peek at their full schedule to see like a win prediction. But yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised if Minnesota finished near the bottom of the Big Ten at all. There's nothing that really stands out about Minnesota. It just all comes down to how that quarterback looks as well.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to TSul always brings up Minnesota because a few years ago he deemed them the winners of the West a couple of years in a row. And after PJ let him down last year, he picked them to get upset by Northwestern, which did happen. And then he said PJ deserves to be fired, and that hasn't happened. So he's been on a warpath just to get rid of PJ Fleck, and it really feels like he's living rent free in his head.
So his hot take would have hit if he would have just stopped running his mouth, but he said Northwestern would upset them and cause PJ Fleck to be fired. Therefore, his hot take did not hit.
Darn. You had him in the first half. But should have kept your mouth shut, like you said. Don't be making bets on Nebraska this year.
Well, let me just jump in here and tell you guys, PJ Fleck should have been fired last year. I mean, how do you accept the fact that this coach is now in his, last year was his 6th year. You go 5-7, miss a bowl game. You've been on a constant downtrend. Nothing's looking forward to Minnesota. Nobody's talking about Minnesota. Recruits aren't talking about Minnesota. Why are you keeping this guy?
As much as I want to talk about a team that we're not even going to face this year, let's just move on here. Let's get on to Rutgers here. I know that
a reason what to keep him. I wasn't going to do it.
No, there is no reason at this point. And you know, I feel like any publicity about PJ Fleck at this point, Minnesota fans are loving it because they all have been calling for his head since Tanner Morgan graduated finally with a doctorate degree and whatever.
Yeah, I wish they had Ethan Kaliak-Manis, though. That guy was terrible. Rutgers has him now.
Yes, which is even better.
Yeah, but they still.
Which will definitely be interesting, especially when you got the Huskers 5-0 at this point, along with TSul and TSul. However, I do think that could be arguably one of the top defenses the Huskers will take on all season.
It's our first loss, guys. I got us losing our first game to Rutgers. I did this from the start of basically the offseason. I had made a schedule prediction very, very early on. Rutgers was my first loss. I've pretty held consistent on that. It is at home, which is one of the things, like it would suck to lose Rutgers at home, but Nebraska winning as many games as they had at this point, 5-0. I think it's hard to predict Nebraska, who hasn't made a bowl game since 2016, is going to play 6 games and be bowl eligible. So I just couldn't do that. So yeah, Rutgers, again, a very physical team. Ethan Kalik-Manis, for what he is, he's 2-0 against Nebraska. So take that for what it's worth. Again, a very physical team. This will be 6 games into the season. So Raiola will have, some wear and tear on him. I think this might be the game where he just kind of, it starts to add up. Maybe we make a few mistakes. He starts to look a little bit more like a freshman. And they can kind of assert their game plan and really rough him up and kind of, have their we'll see how depth is at this point. Injuries, of course, are a concern for Nebraska coming off of last season. But assuming that everybody's healthy, like I think Nebraska would be okay at this point in the season. I think Nebraska's depth is good enough. But it's one of those things where it's just they're going to lose one of these games. And I feel like Rutgers is the toughest team that we face in that early stretch. And I think they're one of the most underrated teams in the country. What Shiano's done with that team is unbelievable. I mean, the physicality comes from Rutgers is the style of high school football that they play in New Jersey. So, and that team is only fit for him to be the coach. Like that team goes where he takes it, and that's it. So that's our first loss.
Yeah, I could really see that. That was the game I was going back and forth on because I was like, the fact that they're at home, Nebraska plays better at home. They're a question mark on the road. Plus, it's homecoming. And I'm like, we typically show up for homecoming. So I picked that one as a win, but I could definitely see Rutgers winning. And I mean, to go with how it was last year,
hold on. I got to interrupt you.
I got a stat for you here, TSul.
How have you gone back and forth on this when the whole rest of your schedule hinges on Nebraska starting 6-0?
That's my point, TSul. That's my point. To pick the way that I did, ultimately I had to pick this as a win. But
Justin, I don't know if you have looked at Rutgers' schedule, but I could see Rutgers having 8+ wins this season.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Me too. They're going to be
TSul has them actually in the Big Ten championship.
That is a damn lie.
Crazy. That's crazy. I was about to send you over to PJ Fleckland. You're fired too.
No, I'm just messing. But what I was going to say is last year was the year we finally lost to Maryland. As a team, we had never lost to Maryland before, and we did it last year finally. It had to happen since we were in the same conference. And I believe we've never lost to Rutgers, even though, 2 or 3 years ago, they were up 13-0 against us at halftime, and we still won that game. So they're kind of due to beat us at some point because we've never lost to them.
Yeah, I think this game's all going to depend on how Nebraska's defense handles Rutgers. If they can hold them, and even if this becomes basically that typical Big Ten game where it's 7-6 at the end, I'd like to think Nebraska's the team that can get a couple chunk plays and actually get in the end zone, where I think our defense will be able to stop Rutgers from scoring a touchdown.
Yep.
I guess after that Rutgers game, do you have the Huskers becoming bowl eligible then with 6 wins against who I am calling the worst team in the Big Ten this year, Indiana?
Absolutely. Yeah. Indiana, like I said before, I had them as my worst team in the Big Ten. I've come around a little bit on them. I think Kurt Signetti's doing a little bit something over there. I wasn't giving them enough credit, but they are a big question mark because they have so many transfers. So I feel like they're a team that could perform better than expected or way worse. Well, I don't know about way worse because they're not expected to perform very well, but it's one of those things where I feel like they could have flashes, but I don't think they will. I think Nebraska wins this one pretty handedly too. I think this is probably a double-digit win for Nebraska, depending on circumstances, of course, but just assuming again the team's fully healthy and at this point of the season, I just think I don't think Indiana is going to be that good, and nor do I think they have the depth to be anywhere near Nebraska's level at that point in the season.
One of the craziest things to think about Indiana is they had Michael Penix there, and he showed flashes of what he was at Washington his freshman year until he got hurt against Penn State. By the way, when he dove for the pylon, I had him in the end zone, and I think Indiana should have won that game.
I think it was a touchdown.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, his season was cut short, and then their offensive coordinator brought him out to Washington, and now we all know Michael Penix Jr.'s name. He's a household legend.
Oh, they got to be in pain.
Yeah. But I unfortunately against Indiana picked an L on this one, and there's a reason for this. I picked it because they're on the road, not that it's a tough road stadium, but the fact that Nebraska in my picks started 6-0. I think they celebrate like they won the Super Bowl, and then they go on the road to Indiana like they're hungover because they have never made a bowl game.
Ever.
Now,
yeah.
Now, before let's just go into it. Let's get on to Ohio State here, but I'm gonna have TSul explain this next transition because apparently starting 6-0 and losing to Indiana is not the craziest part of this stretch. So TSul, I'll turn it back over to you.
Don't do this.
They're coming in and they're beating the Buckeyes in Columbus because after you lose to Indiana, they won't take you seriously. They're going to look at their schedule and say, same old Nebraska, because we're sandwiched in between their game against Oregon and their game against Penn State. So as soon as we lose to Indiana, they're going to be like, same old Nebraska. Look past us right on to Penn State, and that's when we surprise them. And also, Ryan Day is nothing special at Ohio State. He gets all the best recruits, all the best talent, and yet the guy can't win the Big Ten.
I feel like your schedule breakdown is like a documentary.
It will be if it happens.
Team philosophies, like they're celebrating too much at the end of the day, and they came in and they beat Ohio State after losing to the worst team in the Big Ten. Yeah, this sounds far-fetched.
Possibly through the game against Indiana to get Ohio State off their scent.
It gets better. Nice.
Yeah, because 6-1 is a team that somebody's going to overlook.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to be strategizing how to beat Ohio State by losing to other teams. They will never see it coming. Nebraska doesn't have enough to hang with Ohio State by any stretch. They got the best running back tandem in college football. I mean, to me, they're probably in my opinion, the best team in college football with the way the roster is constructed. So, yeah, Nebraska loses this one by double digits.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a reality check. I think the front half of the schedule, like we talked, Rutgers is going to be much improved this year. I think Illinois is going to be a stingy defense for us to play. But other than that, I mean, the rest of these games should be pretty easy to handle. And even Illinois should be easy to handle. That you're going to go into Columbus and you're going to get a reality check pretty quick.
Now, do you think Ohio State is better with Will Howard at quarterback and not Kyle McCord? Or do you think, I personally think Kyle McCord would have been a better option because he's already been in the offense, been with the schemes. I think it's going to be a slow start for Will Howard. I mean, it is Ohio State, so it's not much of a slow start, but I think it's going to get off to a slow start, especially when they play Oregon at Oregon.
So I feel like Kyle McCord and him are the same person. Like, I feel like those two quarterbacks are just so similar. Like, I feel like they both move the needle just as much as the other one does, And so I think, he does some things. There's a little bit of a difference in their game, and just one of them's better in the intermediate passing game. One of them's a little bit better with the deep ball. So I think them having a little bit more opportunity to kind of air it out deep might help, but just I don't really see. I think the other improvements around the quarterback position is what made them better, not the change at quarterback. I think Will Howard's good. Don't get me wrong, but they just seem it seems like a lateral move.
I definitely agree with you on that quarterback move. But I thought at first when you said they moved the needle about the same, and then when you said Ohio State's the best team in college football, I was like, well, where does that take this Syracuse cakewalk of a schedule with Kyle McCord?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So with were you asking me how McCord was going to do, or just in
Well, I'm
general?
just curious because I think that Syracuse schedule, like they've got one tough game, and if McCord can,
Yeah,
act like a capable quarterback, I think Syracuse could surprise some teams in the ACC.
absolutely. Yeah, because that's a level of quarterback play that just won't be had anywhere else. Like, and he knows how to operate on big stages, so and he's been in a high pressure situation. He's not going to be at a ton like a high pressure situation at Syracuse. So I think that's all going to play into his favor. I think Syracuse will be good.
Have you guys checked out? Sorry, I'm going off topic here. I looked at Ohio State's schedule because TSul was talking about, quarterbacks getting battle tested or whatever he was talking about. Have you seen their out of conference schedule? It reminds me a lot of Michigan's from last year. Akron,
No.
Western Michigan, and Marshall is their out of conference schedule.
Stuff.
Yeah. Jeez.
I mean,
At
got to
the
do
end of the day, 3 wins are 3 wins.
Yeah, got to do what you got.
And I think we are going to be starting to see a lot more of that because this Big Ten schedule is not going to get any easier as the years go on. That you're going to see a lot of these teams starting to schedule those cupcakes to try to get ready for the Big Ten season.
There's already play an extra conference game over the SEC, so
Yeah.
might as well.
Now, so let's head back here because TSul's trying to break down Ohio State now. After the loss to Ohio State in Columbus, Nebraska has UCLA coming to town. Again, one of those weird Pac-12 teams coming in. I think UCLA is honestly, if Washington didn't lose as many kids as they did after DeBoer left, I would have said UCLA was probably the worst team transferring in or coming into the Big Ten. How do you see this game headed?
I still think they are very close to the worst team coming in. I'm not super confident that Washington's that much worse than them. Deshaun Foster as a head coach hiring didn't make much sense to me just because he had not had any previous really coordinator experience or head coach experience at all. So it seemed like he was kind of the last option for them. I don't know if that was because they couldn't get anybody else. Tony White, we don't know what happened with that situation. Of course, he want to stay at Nebraska, I guess, but whatever happened with the other coaching candidates, we never really heard on. So Deshaun Foster, I do think he's a coach who can, rally those players and make them play hard. But I just don't think that roster right now is anywhere close to where it needs to be. I don't think UCLA is really a big player when it comes to NIL. They don't have the best facilities in the world. So yeah, I think Nebraska beats UCLA. I don't see them as too much of a threat. Now, we never know. It's different styles of play at this point of the season. It's somebody Nebraska hasn't seen in a while. But I just think at that point in the year, I don't think UCLA really has a roster of 2-3 deep yet. So I just think at that point in the season, especially, they're going to be worn down a lot. And I think Nebraska rolls out in that one.
I picked an L against UCLA. I definitely can see them winning, but I picked it just based on my picks. If they beat Ohio State, I think they're going to come out and have it be a trap game.
You're basing your picks off of your previous picks.
That's right.
I don't think that's how it's supposed to work. I think it's supposed to go game by game. Each one is its own individual.
I'm playing it out based on how I picked it. If it plays out exactly how I picked it, I could see that being a trap game.
He is in the locker room and knows the vibes at this point in the season.
Yeah, he's a fly on the wall for sure.
So again, I think Nebraska got kind of a gift here with Big Ten scheduling, putting the two Pac-12 teams back to back here. I also like that we got Nebraska or UCLA and USC. How do you see us going on the road to USC? Again, a team that's going to have a lot of change there. How do you see this game heading out?
I got us losing to USC, right? Depending on the schedule prediction you watch. At one point I had us, and this is the game I'm really 50-50 on, but this is also one of the games that I think is very, very important. Now the reason I'm 50-50 on is this, right? Of course they lost Caleb Williams, but Miller Moss coming in. Miller Moss is a really, really good quarterback. USC has athletes. They have players on the defense, right? They do have players on the defense. Defense was awful last year, god awful, but they brought in D'Anton Lynn, and I think D'Anton Lynn can bring that, defense from about 100 something ranked to maybe 50, 60th, right? But then at the same time, their weakness plays into Nebraska's weakness, really. Offense, their defense struggles. We have a top-notch offense. They have a quarterback who's making his first year, his starting year, in Miller Moss. So I do think that's why that game is important, because I think that's an opportunity for us to really go out there and show that our offense can, really kind of compete with these teams. And I think that's the first opportunity to really kind of show it off, because I think UCLA is going to play our offense a little bit tougher than USC is. I just don't think USC really schematically and personnel wise is there. And I think that's going to help Nebraska. It's just going to be a matter of, how much can Nebraska stop that Lincoln Riley offense? Because we know Lincoln Riley can put up points. He can develop quarterbacks into gunslingers. So that game's 50-50, and that's why I flip-flopped on it a few times. But I'm going to go ahead and put it as a loss here.
Yeah, and like you're saying about that USC team, I don't really think it matters who's playing quarterback. We even saw in their bowl game, their backup went out there and threw for 6 touchdowns. I really just think it's the Lincoln Riley style, Lincoln Riley, say it 3 times fast, Lincoln Riley's style of an offense and the play there, that it really sets up for a quarterback to be special or show out. And it's just a lot of high flying offense, and they have a lot of speed and a lot of talent on the outsides. It is USC, Southern Cal, so obviously they're getting a lot of these top recruits, and I think that's really what has benefited a lot of these quarterbacks that have played for Lincoln Riley, even at Oklahoma. You look at it, and that is why I am also predicting Caleb Williams is a bust. All right,
I agree.
I got Nebraska going out and beating Southern Cal. I just think USC is going to be I just think USC is going to be beat down from their ridiculous schedule they were handed out this year. They have a top 5 hardest schedule in the entire football world. And I think they're going to be run down kind of like Nebraska was in the early days of the Big Ten. They don't have the offense or the defensive line to stick with these guys, and they're going to play a lot of physical teams. And I think it's just going to take a toll on these guys.
That's the first actual breakdown you've given.
and I think that's an important take on it too. I had this marked as a loss. I think it's going to depend what game Nebraska's playing at this point in the season. I think if they had USC earlier on the schedule, maybe if that was our second Big Ten game, like if Purdue and USC were flipped, I would have locked that in as a win without thinking about it. That USC would have been going through some growing pains. It would have been early in the season. At this point, it's how good is USC's offense versus is Nebraska trying to keep up with USC by throwing the ball, or are we coming out and controlling the tempo, running the clock, and really manhandling them and playing Big Ten football against USC?
Well, B-Saw, listen to this. These are the games that USC plays before they play us, and listen to the physicality teams that they're playing before we match up with them. LSU, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, all before we play them. It's a lot of teams.
You threw Minnesota in there after you.
And
they play physical. Minnesota plays physical. They're just not good at it, but they play that way.
You think we're going to catch that after you railed on Minnesota?
At this point, he does have PJ Fleck not as their coach. That's part of his thing.
So
and Harbaugh is stepping in.
They got real physical. No coach. They're just physical now.
Yeah. I think that is probably, like you said, Justin, probably the game that's the biggest 50-50 on the schedule. And then probably Rutgers is that next one. I think those 2 games are going to be tough, and it's going to depend on Nebraska Rutgers. How do we match up against their defense? Nebraska USC, how do we play them? Like,
Yeah.
are we playing catch up and we make mistakes with a freshman quarterback, or are we controlling the tempo and really controlling the clock?
I think in that game against USC, Nebraska, to be able to win that game is going to have to play a Big Ten style play. If they try to go out there and compete against USC in the Pac-12 style West Coast offense, I think we can find ourselves behind and behind pretty quick. I think if Nebraska can get a couple stops on defense and keep this USC offense at bay for, at least the first half, keep it close. I think if we get the lead in the second half, you just got to run the clock and get out with a win. This is another top team that the Huskers would be playing, arguably the second hardest team they're going to be playing all year. That this is one team that they really got to show this is Big Ten play. And even when Nebraska joined the Big Ten, that's what a lot of the Big Ten teams did. Even if they weren't as good as Nebraska or didn't have the talent that Nebraska had, they showed them what the Big Ten play was. And it doesn't care how they didn't care how ugly the game looked. A win is a win, and that's Bielema is one of the best at that. So that's what I think Nebraska is going to have to do if they look to win that game.
Jason, I really agree with you. And the first chance that we'll get to see Nebraska do that against is Colorado. Colorado is a spitting image of what USC is. USC is just a little bit better at what they do, but they play the same way. They don't have good line play. They have some DBs out there. They got some wide receivers and a quarterback that could put it up. That's how they play. And so you got to come out there and run the ball, just like we said last year with Colorado, and we got away from it. And that's where the play call became kind of questionable last season, if you remember.
I was partially too because we kept turning the ball over and then playing from behind and wanting to establish that run game really kind of went by the wayside because, Nebraska played a great first half and was down like 13-0 at half.
Yeah.
So that's another factor of this too, is just how many times has Nebraska been in a situation where they've, really had to go against a high-powered offense and needed their offense to maintain a lead because USC is going to be airing that ball out, trying to make a comeback if Nebraska gets ahead. So that'd be another good test too, just seeing how if Nebraska can hold off a team like that, if they get out to an early lead, can they hold off a USC? Can they just keep scoring points and try to keep ahead of them? Because that's what great teams do. So that'll be fun to watch.
And one thing we finally see as an adjustment as the Huskers in general with Matt Rule at the helm running the show. Under Scott Frost, we weren't good. When Mickey Joseph took over, it was still the same type of offense that Scott Frost ran. Time of possession and holding on to the ball. We finally saw it last year where in the Big Ten, if you hold the ball longer, odds are you're winning the game. And Scott Frost came in and he was trying to run like a West Coast style offense and just try to put up points, but as fast as he could. However, if you don't score on one of those drives, there you go. Your defense is back on the field and they're getting exhausted. And by the end of the game, you're going to get just beat down.
100%. Yeah. That style did not work for anybody. The Big Ten did not have to adjust like Scott Frost said.
No.
I know we all remember that interview. Big Ten. The Big Ten's gonna have to adjust to Nebraska. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And but I do think that it would have been better for Scott Frost if we were getting Scott Frost today and this year coming in with other West Coast style offenses joining, not just in Ohio State, who obviously can run a West Coast style offense because they have the best talent in the Big Ten, arguably. Maybe not anymore with, Oregon coming in, who can obviously get some of those top recruits, or Michigan obviously gets some of those recruits, but really it's just the offensive line they get that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Scott Frost could have had a better opportunity if he joined with a lot more teams that were going to be playing that West Coast style offense. But when you got to go against these guys that are just going to run it down your throat and just have big bodies out there, it really did not set up well for him.
Yeah, Scott
Frost
failed.
Scott Frost would have had a better chance too if he just opened his arms for guys who wanted to come play here, like I don't know, Joe Burrow.
Yeah, but Joe Burrow is not Joe Burrow we know today if he came to Nebraska.
He's like a 3-star transfer, and we had a room full of 4-star QBs.
Yeah, and he went to a place where they had the two top wide receivers in the NFL. I mean, come on.
Joe Burrow would have been Joe Burrow at Nebraska. Yeah.
He was telling Raiola to go shove it too. So just know that, Jason. If you're riding that, you're riding without Raiola too.
Yeah, I think you forget too. As much as everybody thought Scott Frost knew how to recruit, turned around, everybody was like, oh, he turned around UCF and all of this. It's a hell of a lot easier to recruit to Orlando, Florida than it is to Lincoln, Nebraska. And regardless of the history, you have to get guys who understand the history of Nebraska football, understand the history of college football, and want to come in and make play in the Big Ten. Versus you go to Central Florida, you don't really have a GPA standard to maintain. You just have to recruit a bunch of athletes who just want to go to Florida.
Now, before you go out there and just start throwing all this banter at Scott Frost, remember he brought in Casey Thompson, who's going to be playing quarterback at Oklahoma. That's a pretty good quarterback. He wasn't opening his arms to Jeff throws a pick six.
That's
Jay, so let's see how Oklahoma does in the SEC this year, because my prediction is not going to be good.
Frost just did everything else wrong, right? When he was at UCF, he could get away with getting tertiary players in the state of Florida, but like to recruit to Nebraska, you need the top players in the state of Florida. Not only that, I went through and I did a whole breakdown on his recruiting classes year over year, and 7%, I think it was like 7 or 17% of his class was from the 500-mile radius, or 17% of the roster was from within the 500-mile radius. Back when Nebraska was winning, it was like 37, 38%, right? And he didn't even have a secondary, tertiary state. It rotated every year. Like Nebraska right now under Matt Rule, they're focusing heavy on Texas, Florida, and Nebraska, right? And intermixing a few of those other states as well. Scott Frost just had no backup plan. And then whenever those Florida schools got good, they started taking the top talent there. Nebraska was trying to get players from California and all this, and nothing was fucking working. And it was just like nobody, pardon my French, nobody was staying, right? The roster retention, people were just constantly leaving. It was a revolving door. That was another thing too. Whoever we recruited, we couldn't get to stay on campus.
And I think that was interesting too. When you looked at even just going off of skill positions, I think it was every receiver that Scott Frost recruited, I think by after year 2, they were all gone. I don't think anybody lasted through year 3. Because I think the closest was it Wandale? And I think Wandale transferred going into year 3 or right after year 3. But I think he was the longest tenured. I
think it was going into year 3. But yeah, there was a breakdown. Whenever I did the breakdown, I did the percentage of people that he kind of even got to stay on campus throughout his classes. And it was super low. Like, barely any of the Florida kids. And Florida was the primary state of recruiting. And it wasn't even the top recruiting state some of the years because he just couldn't pull the players out of there. But yeah, it's abysmal looking back at those players and how many of them actually had meaningful playing time.
Yeah.
But that does bring us to another game here coming up with November 23rd when Wisconsin comes to town. Since we have joined the Big Ten, this has been a team that we have really struggled against.
Yeah, Wisconsin is our kryptonite. Luke Fickell, I will say I love Luke Fickell as a coach. I think he's excellent. He was the guy that I wanted Nebraska to hire, whenever they were doing their search. And but I'm happy we landed with the Rule. Don't get me wrong, but Fickell has another year to kind of implement a system in place there, and he's a really good coach. Sorry about my dog. He's a really good coach, and so I think he's going to have that team going by this point in the season. I think Wisconsin's, they're just a very solid team. It's just going to be a matter of, do they have enough to be able to run that system efficiently? That new offense that he wants to run there. I don't know that for certain. And so I've gone back and forth on this one a few times, but I'm going to have to say Nebraska wins this game. Okay. And then we'll get to Iowa next. I hate to do this.
And that's, I'm on the other end. I get what you're saying too. This game, it's kind of like, until you show me you can do it consistently, I've got Wisconsin beating us. I think especially, you look at Wisconsin's quarterback play the last handful of years, it hasn't been very good. And I think this year they're only going to go as far as Van Dyke can take them. And he's very inconsistent at best. So for all we know, I mean, Wisconsin could be, at that point in the season, they played 10 games. So they could be at, 5-5 coming into Nebraska. And they very realistically could get bowl eligible because Van Dyke could play his best game of the season against us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have Nebraska coming in and beating Wisconsin. I think we're due for a win against Wisconsin. The last 3 or 4 years in a row, we've had them on the ropes and just seem to find a way to lose. And I think that stops this year based on the improvement that Rule does from year 1 to year 2. Nebraska seems to be on the ups, especially from last year. Even though they did that at the end of the season with the final 3 or 4 games, whatever it was, Wisconsin seems like they've gotten worse last year from where they were years prior, and we've gotten better. And I expect those trends to continue, and we'll pass Wisconsin this year.
That had a lot to do with that fickle West Coast style he brought in there. So
yeah, because you went from run heavy to now he wants you to throw the ball and you don't have a quarterback. So
yeah.
And all of a sudden, Wisconsin won't be the running capital of the world. And that might just help out the Huskers because that has really been our kryptonite because Bielema did it the best, especially when he was at Wisconsin. But I do want to say that Matt Rule, it is focusing on those 3-point losses here in this offseason. They got that show on YouTube now, Chasing Three, definitely worth a watch. But that is what has really been the kryptonite for the Huskers. It's all of these one-score losses to where if you could just get over the hump. Scott Frost was on that bubble too. I mean, Matt Rule was not the only coach to be there, but he is getting us one step closer. And I really like the year-over-year trends from what he did at Baylor and what he did at Temple.
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, it's the so are you picking us to win that game or lose that game against Wisconsin?
I got us losing that game.
Okay. I was like, did you even give a prediction there?
He was avoiding the topic.
I was about to say, hold on. I was like, before I go, I don't even think I got an answer there. Okay, so you got us losing. Okay, cool. That's what I wanted to know that.
So TSul then doesn't think that we're catching 3 this year. He thinks next year maybe we'll chase and catch that 3.
Let me see. So is when he's talking about the chasing 3, you talking about what are you talking about? The 1-score losses? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, and then there's a show on YouTube. It's like a documentary of the Huskers. Yeah. And that's what's about those 1-score losses. Yeah, it's a great documentary. I actually really liked it. I watched the whole thing. Getting ready for the season, hyped up for it now. But I just think that it's a lot to expect from a freshman quarterback coming in. This is obviously his first year. He's going against, the Big Ten is no joke when he comes into play here. I do think he's going to get us over the hump. But that hump is just 6 wins, and that hump is getting us to a bowl game.
Now, TSul, remember this game against Wisconsin's at home. If it was in Madison, I wouldn't debate it. I'd pick it as an L until they show me that they could go to Madison and actually play a football game. This is at home. We should be able to take care of Wisconsin at home.
Yes, but I dove in last year head first and said that, we got a new quarterback. Everything's going to turn around because we had Jeff Sims. Listen, I do believe that Matt Rule is turning the program around. Can he turn it around that quick? I just don't know. It's
you dove in head first. You picked the team to go 6-6 last year.
And you're missing
that was diving in head first.
Missing a lot of other elements here, right? Like it's not just year over year. You pick thought the quarterback's going to do. Nebraska's returning 78% of its production. You got Jamal Banks coming in here, who, in my opinion, will be a top 15 college football receiver. You got Isaiah Nair is going to be a playmaker. We got the young guys a year, advanced. The system's getting more advanced. You got an actual dedicated quarterback coach now because you didn't have last year. So you have your tight ends coach actually on the tight ends. I just think there's so many things that are in Nebraska's favor this year that leads to them taking that big jump over just last year we were excited about a quarterback. So this year, I just think there's so many indications that this team's going to be better. And Phil Still came on to my channel and we're talking about his magazine. And he said teams with double-digit turnovers, 75% of teams with double-digit turnovers improve by 3 wins year over year. 75% of teams with double-digit turnovers improved by 3 wins year over year. So, and also there was another statistic. If you randomized every play result for every Nebraska game this season and every turnover, talking penalties and everything, just randomize the order of when it happened. Everything still happened the same. Nebraska was due for 3.3 more wins based on bad timing. And Nebraska is in that same statistic. They've led that 3 out of the last 4 years. So, so there's a lot of things indicating that Nebraska is there,
The one thing I do want to say that I need to see to jump all in, I think the offensive line play is really going to need to be stepping up. I think we have the same guys, and I do think they're going to be a lot better than they were last year, which to me isn't really saying that much. I think they got to improve a lot more to be able to support a freshman quarterback coming in. And that brings us to arguably going to be the toughest defense that Dylan Raiola will see his entire first season here at Nebraska will be against Iowa. Again, this is a long season. However, Iowa is one of those teams where they don't need an offense to win games.
Yeah, nor do they have one ever, and they still beat us. Yeah, and that's the most frustrating part, I think, is the fact that they don't need to win it. They don't need an offense. They almost made the playoffs last year without a damn offense. But I think Iowa this year, I got us losing to Iowa mainly because I think Iowa is just a little bit more designed right now for. I just think they're built a little bit more structured, and of course they got more depth because Kirk Ferentz has been their coach for a while. They do things their way, and they don't divert from that. They don't deviate from that. So at this point of the season, I don't know where Nebraska is going to be in terms of their depth. I don't know, because I know Iowa has the depth, and I know Iowa's going to be, they don't have a good quarterback. They can't throw the ball to save their life, but they don't beat themselves. They don't make a lot of mistakes. So I just think that if Nebraska's got 2 losses coming into this game, I think this sets up as kind of a game that potentially not I don't want to say a trap game because they're going to be prepared for Iowa, but I think Iowa just really gets up for this game. And I don't know how Nebraska's going to look. I don't know how Raiola is going to be at the end of the season. I don't know how he's going to feel at the end of the season. So just something in my mind just has me feeling like we're going to lose this game to Iowa. And Iowa's defense is probably going to be better than it was last year. They're of course they lose Cooper DeJean, but they got a lot of experience coming back on that defense, and they've got a lot of upgrades that they've made. So yeah, they're going to be a tough team to go against. But I'm really curious to see Raiola against that defense and just see kind of how he does. But I just have him losing to them in his first year.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Justin. I also picked an L against Iowa. I think the fact that it's on the road, says a lot for me. I mean, Iowa on the road, that's just a tough contest for anybody. Their fans are going to be there. They're going to be loud. It's, you got the pink locker room or whatever they do. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be an L. And I think this game comes down to, I believe the winner of Iowa, Nebraska makes the Big Ten championship. I think the records will say that. And that's where I think Iowa's just more they're just more battle tested. Ferentz has been there forever, so it might be his going away party that the Big Ten handed him this easy schedule to just make the championship, get annihilated, and retire.
And I like Tim Lester, their new OC. I like Tim Lester way more than I like Brian Ferentz. So I think Tim Lester was actually a really good hire by them.
Yeah, I think it still comes down to, Iowa's defense is going to be good. How does Nebraska's offense pair up against them? And then also on the other side of the ball, Iowa's offense, I'm not expecting to score really anything against our defense. I mean, any of those things that you've seen right now, Cade McNamara looks like a guy he's a player with the yips right now. He's got no idea how to play quarterback. And in theory, I don't expect him to be their quarterback by the time we play him. But maybe he figures it out and, returns on, basically gives Iowa a good quarterback, but I don't see it. He's struggling. He's got no confidence in himself. And I don't see any way that Iowa scores more than 3 points on maybe a turnover Nebraska has, and they start in the red zone and settle for a field goal. So it's one of those things.
You can't blame him for not having any confidence. I mean, he went from one of the top offenses in college football, not just in the Big Ten, to not one of the worst offense in college football. I mean, everyone in the right mind would have the yips at that point.
But to that point, I mean, the guy started over Joe Milton, who's now in the NFL. Joe Milton's been a practice hero at Michigan and then also at Tennessee, and everybody kind of buys into it. They're talking now in New England that Joe Milton's a better quarterback than Drake May. And at what point are people going to realize that, what he does on 7-7 isn't what he's going to do when it's 11-11?
So you think Cade McNamara is a good quarterback?
No, I don't think he's a good quarterback. I'm saying, like, when you start comparing some of these guys who have like gotten an opportunity to go further, I think McNamara is probably about the same caliber that Joe Milton is, and now Milton's in the NFL. It's hard because it makes it sound like I'm saying he's a good quarterback there by saying Milton's it. Like, I think if it was the opposite way and Milton went to Iowa and McNamara went to Tennessee, I think McNamara still probably would have gotten an opportunity in the NFL. Whereas now he's got no future there.
Yeah, I think I'm probably meet you in the middle there. I think I don't think he, but I could be dead wrong. I don't think he's quite as good as Joe Milton, but again, two completely different situations. No way for me to know. So he very well could be, but yeah, it's hard to succeed on that offense regardless, for sure.
Yeah. And, with Iowa losing their MVP from last year and their punter,
Yep.
I want to see their new special teams guys and see how they produce as well. But I think this is going to be a close game. It's always a dogfight, but I'd like to think that Rayola goes out with a win against Iowa to start, and hopefully, we carry on from there in the future years.
Absolutely.
It's about baby steps there, BSul. Baby steps.
So I guess with you got the Huskers, Justin, going 9-3.
8-4.
I guess who's gonna?
I've had them 8-4.
8-4.
3. I've had them either way.
Yeah.
You gotta lock it in. We want to know what it is.
My most recent prediction, 9-3.
9-3. Okay, and it all lingers on that USC game.
Yeah. So I had a ceiling, floor, and a regular prediction. So I did a video on it. My floor was 5-7, and somebody got mad at me because my floor was 5-7. They were like, "How dare you? How dare you think this team would only win 5 games?" I'm like, bro, it's a floor. Like, how dare you think Nebraska's guaranteed 6 wins?
Yeah.
So I had the floor there, and the 9-3 was the kind of the most realistic scenario on my predictions, and then I had the ceiling at 10-2. So I was right by the ceiling. But yeah, the biggest toss up for me is that game, and then I think in my 4-loss prediction, I think I had us dropping. I can't remember. Might have been both to Wisconsin and Iowa, but I'd have to look back at that. But I think it was 9-3 today, so I'll rock with that one.
Okay, sounds good. But now that you got it locked in, no changing it. He's got him 9-3, fellas, 9-3. But we got to know, who do you have as the playmakers, the top guy you think is going to be the star on offense and defense to carry this team to 9-3?
All right. So without saying the obvious answer, I think the star of this team is probably going to be Jamal Banks. I think Jamal Banks finishes the season as a top 15 wide receiver in all of college football. I think he's that good. He played at Wake Forest with a bad offense, bad quarterback, and still had 0 drops. Had one of the highest drop grades according to PFF. And so he reminds me a lot of, and now I'm just saying this, everybody understands what this means. When I say it, I'm comparing the style of player that he is, not saying he's going to be him. I compare him to DeAndre Hopkins, and he's just a possession guy who's going to be sure-handed, going to be able to get you a first down, going to be able to go up, get the ball in the red zone, good ball skills, good hands. So I think Jamal Banks is going to be the big piece of the puzzle this year that's going to get Nebraska through a lot of situations and out of a lot of, third downs, et cetera.
Yeah, Nebraska recent's had just a lot of good luck with wide receivers. I think Billy Kemp might have been, one of the lowest, stars out there versus some of the other guys that we've come in as transfers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I think, like you said, Jamal Banks being a great, sure-handed guy. I think that's what they thought, or that's what the coaching staff thought we were getting when Billy Kemp was coming in. And again, not to his detriment. I don't think we had consistent enough quarterback play to get him the ball last year. that I think this year having Dylan Raiola at quarterback, I think Jamal Banks is really going to show off and show out, and I think it's just going to catapult him to the next level.
Yeah, I think Billy Kemp was a little too small. He took some big hits, man.
Yeah, he got lit up on a handful of those middle routes.
Yeah, he did.
And we were missing like a true number one. He would have been like the perfect slot receiver or something.
Yeah.
Like dump it to him when the other guys got double coverage or something.
He reminded me a lot of Wandale, where we didn't get to use him the way we should have. We had to use him the way we had to,
Well, it definitely didn't help that Marcus Washington was missing, like 4 or 5 games last season.
IGC was out, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they were nothing like Trey Palmer or even Samari Torrey at that point.
Yeah.
But then I guess, so you gave us our star on offense. Do you got one for defense that you think is going to help this defense keep us in some games?
Yeah. So there's 2 people I point to, and I'm trying to, because GIF is the obvious answer, of course, but I want to go a little different. I was going to say Tommy Hill, however, because Tommy Hill is one of my favorite players in this defense. But I think Tommy Hill might be one of those guys that they go away from. So like, I don't know if his stats are going to necessarily show, crazy numbers, because they might not throw the ball to him a ton. I like Prince Will Umami Whalen. Umami Whalen. I don't know how to say it. I'm just
I don't either.
Y'all. Unman that's actually how you say it. Unman but I'm picking him. He's the jack. He's a guy who can rush the passer. He's better in coverage. He can do a lot of different things. And, he's now in his sophomore season, so he's going to be a lot improved. And in this defense, I just think the defensive around him is a lot better. So it's going to make his job a lot easier when the player next to you, to your right and your left, are doing their job. You don't have to worry about their responsibility, etc. I think this offense, or this defensive line, is going to be much improved, because it's so deep. You got Jamari Butler, you have Ty Robinson, you have Cam Linhart, like you have Riley Van Poppel, you have all these guys coming off this D line, and I think that's going to make the linebackers' job that much easier. So I say Prince Will Umami Allen. Uman Mielen. I always forget the part. It's Uman Mielen, but I always forget the Uman. So it just sounds like I'm uttering, just like I'm spitting out the alphabet in the wrong order.
No,
I have no clue how to say it.
I was going to say, I think you're dead on. I think that defensive line is going to make the linebackers' job so much easier. I do want to bring out here. I've thought it over. We did our offense and defensive MVPs a while back, and the more that I've looked at it, my original pick for defensive MVP was Bly Hill, hoping that he was going to be healthy again, thinking that he was going to get some more targets with Tommy Hill being on the other side. And I've kind of gone back and forth. But I'm gonna switch it. I think Hartzog, coming off kind of a sophomore slump season, I think Malcolm's gonna show out year 3, and I think he'll be put on some watch lists going into his senior year next year.
One of the guys I do want to highlight to watch for, though, is Jamari Butler making that move from a linebacker up to a D line. He put on a ton of weight here, and he's going to be a bigger body on the edge there.
He was our sack leader last year. People, I don't know if y'all saw my clip from Chancellor's episode, or Brewington's episode on 93.7 The Ticket, but it was a clip of me basically saying, he was like, who's the most underrated, like, defensive lineman we have? And I said, it's probably our leading sack getter from last year, Jamari Butler, because nobody's talking about him, but he had the most 6 sacks, so 5.5, whatever. But yeah, that's.
And what definitely helps with that is Nash getting doubled a lot. And I think when Ty's out there, they're going to have to try to double Ty. So it might leave Jamari just on an island there. It's going to be a 1-on-1 or a 1v2. And he's getting chipped by the running back there stepping up. But I think he's really going to have a lot of openings, and he put on a lot of weight and a lot of mass. And it's going to be interesting to see how Nash looks as well. I mean, he's got to be putting on more weight now, but he cut a lot of that for wrestling, and he's going to be a lot faster this year.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of the thing with Butler and why he's underrated is because his sacks are just solid technique. He comes in, makes the tackle, and it's a quick play. Versus like when Ty Robinson gets home, he usually annihilates the quarterback, to where like in the Iowa game, he knocked him out. And I think he knocked out a quarterback last year or 2 years ago, I guess it would have been, in, I want to say either Illinois or Minnesota or
It
something like
was
that.
Tanner Morgan.
Yeah. So when he gets home, you hear it. Everyone sees it. Everyone's watching the replay as to where Butler is just solid technique.
Yeah. And Beasol, to your point about Bly Hill too, I just want to say like that's a great call because like Bly Hill, I thought people were sleeping on Bly Hill off season. So the fact that you picked him because like he was one of my favorite players, and I was right there with you with him because he's just that long rangey type of cornerback. And then with when it comes to Jamari, I think you're spot on right there. Ty's just a game wrecker, right? Like he's going to you're going to feel Ty when he hits you, and
Mm-hmm.
and then also to JSoul's point, like that's that Nash with him doing wrestling, in my opinion, because I do boxing, right? I've done MMA I do MMA for 6 months, but I boxed for 10 years, right? And wrestling is the hardest training in terms of like the hardest workers, the most physical training, the most intense training. It's wrestling, and so he is going to be in insanely good shape this year. Not only that, learning more of the techniques from wrestling of how to move people and use leverage and balance and all of those things. He puts that, little bit of lean muscle back on. Yeah, he's going to be a nightmare. And to your point about drawing double teams, that's his job in the middle because with the way this the way this 3-5 defense works, it's all about numbers, right? And the offense, if the offense can get one-on-one on you and get numbers, like they're fine. But that's what that nose really needs to do is if he can make an extra block or have to step up and pick him up in most concepts, you're going to have numbers on them. So yeah, that's a very good point about the doubling of them too, setting up the rest of the defense as well.
And we know you got the Huskers at 9-3. Does that have them in your predictions good enough to make the Big Ten championship, or who do you got in it?
No, because TSul, you had him in the Big Ten championship game, but it's the number 1 and number 2 team.
No, I got him. I got him playing Iowa for the Big Ten championship because the way I have it, Nebraska playing Iowa. Nebraska's 9-2. Iowa might be a one-loss team at this point because their schedule is so favorable for them. I have the winner of that game potentially getting in based on tiebreakers and stuff too.
Ohio State and Oregon. Yeah, that's it.
Not even a glance at Penn State.
No,
yeah, Oregon to me is like Ohio State and Oregon are in that top tier that there's like 3 or 4 teams in. And then Penn State to me is kind of towards the back end of the second tier, right? And I do think, James Franklin, he's a good coach. Drew Aller, Penn State fans really believe in Drew Aller, so we'll see. I think Drew Aller is going to be better, but I just think Penn State is I just don't think they have the athletes to go run with those teams. I just don't think they're quite as good. I just think the rosters that Ohio State and Oregon have are just 2 of the top in college football. They might be the top 2 in college football.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I will have you know of the panel that we had. One second here. Everybody who's come on and done picks, we have 1, 2, 3, and you would be the 4th or 5th person here to give Iowa or Oregon versus Ohio State. Do you have, I know you said earlier you thought Ohio State top to bottom was the best roster. Do you think Ohio State ekes out the Big Ten championship against Oregon in year 1?
I do. Yeah, I do. I think they're just a little bit more, they've got more experience in that late game season. I just feel like Oregon is still, coming on as being a good team. Ohio State has been the most consistent team throughout college football history. If you look at the mark of consistency, it is Ohio State, right? And in more recent years, they've been in playoffs. They've been in these late, these Michigan games late in the season when they're fighting for that. I just think they're better suited for that moment than Oregon is. And I think Oregon will get there, but just Dan Lanning's only in his second year there. So like they'll get more experience in that. But I think Ohio State's built for that. And also Ryan Day's coaching for his life. It seems like every season, dude wins 11 games and he's on the hot seat. So
because he loses the most important one.
That is correct.
Michigan.
However, do you think that is correct, TSul? That is definitely correct, and that's the only game Ohio State really cares about at this point. Do you think Ohio State goes out there and beats Oregon twice this year?
Oh man. That's
Or do you
tough.
think Oregon gets them in the beginning of the year?
That's tough. But
Or what about 3 times? What if they match up then again in the playoffs?
I have thought about that, and I think the most likely scenario due to Ohio State, in not recent couple seasons, but like the last like 5 or 6 seasons, I think they drop the early game, and then I think they come back and get it late.
That is exactly what I predicted. I think, and it doesn't really suit Ohio State well, just because it's an early game in the season. They got a new quarterback here. Obviously, Oregon does too, but that it's on the road at Oregon.
Yeah, and I think Oregon's the type of team that's just going to be fired up and hyped up for that. And I think Ohio State is so used to big games and stuff like that. Maybe they just, Oregon just catches them. And then, but I think as the season goes along, I think, yeah, Ohio State's just built for that long haul a little bit better.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Sully Scoop as we get 1 week closer to college football. We want to give a special thanks to Justin for joining us here.
I appreciate it, man. Thank y'all for having me on again, man. It's a blast. Always, I'll have y'all back on my show as well because I always love chatting with y'all. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. And where can we catch your podcast at? Where can we listen to you at? Just a reminder for the.
Yeah, for sure. You can find me on X at _H-Town Husker, on YouTube at Big Ten Show, or also at Nebraska Football at the Voice of College Football. So if you type in Nebraska Voice College Football VOCFB, you'll find it.
And don't forget to check out our website, www.thesullyscoop.com, and you can catch us on Twitter at Sully_Scoop.
Go Big Red.